The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday, April 26, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. We are an hour earlier, as we will be on Wednesday nights going forward. Last Wednesday at this time, we were hosting the Intercept Live. The Intercept Live will be this Friday at noon, and that's when you can come in and see us hang out. We have a great lineup for this Friday. Glenn Greenwald is going to be there. Thomas Frank, the author of Listen Liberal, he's going to be there. And What's the Matter with Kansas, which is my favorite of the two books. And then also we'll be joined by Professor Adolph Reed. And if I'm lucky enough, I believe L. Joy Williams will be joining me for a brief conversation. So we have a full house on this coming Friday with the Intercept Live. Make sure you're there. We're going to be streaming in multiple places, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the Benjamin Dixon Show, and we want you to weigh in on the conversation tonight. We're discussing Ann Coulter. She's lamenting this Berkeley situation. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about Donald Trump's tax breaks. Obviously, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. And you can weigh in. 857-600-0518 is the number to call. And you can give us some comments, and we'll try to get the comments inside of the show tonight. All right. Thank you to our patrons. Sorry, I'm not filibustering, but I want to make sure I cover everything, as I always do. Thank you to the patrons who make this possible. Those of you who like, share, and subscribe, you also make this possible. But definitely in this YouTube apocalypse where nearly every one of my videos on foreign policy, and you know I love to talk about foreign policy, man, even some basic videos about Donald Trump have been demonetized. So our sponsors, our patrons, you are very important to us now more than ever. So let's jump in top of the news. Donald Trump's tax breaks. Steve Mnuchin has posited or forwarded that this is going to be the greatest tax break in history, the largest tax break, largest tax reform in history. The problem is that Republicans, some Republican senators and congressmen don't buy this. And so they're going off. Let's just go through the numbers first before we get to the politics of it. So the plan is going to cut the 35% corporate tax income rate to 15%. Now, this is pretty much exactly what he forwarded during the primaries and during the general election. We've already dissected who this is going to benefit. So he's really just bringing the plan that he's already forwarded. That's the first thing. The second thing is this is exactly a standard Republican play. This is not surprising, and this is in many ways to be expected from a president that is dependent on the Republican Party to give him the substance of his presidency. So the fact that he's forwarding this tax policy that is lockstep with Republicanism is no surprise, even though he touted himself to be a non-establishment outsider. That's one thing. But the second thing is that the cutting the corporate. What responsibility do corporations have to America? Because that's the real question. Because if we participate in this race to the bottom, and we'll get to the personal income tax differences, but right now the corporate tax rate being dropped from 35% to 15%, that is unbelievable. I mean, it's so good that I want to start a corporation to live my entire life out of, right? I mean, 15%, they will be paying less than people like me who don't make a whole lot of money and work a whole lot of jobs to make the money that I do make. Corporations will be paying a lower tax rate than I do. And it goes back to that anecdote that everyone always uses. Should Warren Buffett pay less than his secretary? And we're talking about percentages, obviously. But this is what Donald Trump is forwarding, and the markets are responding, right? The Wall Street, they don't care how crazy Donald Trump is, or how xenophobic he is, or how Islamophobic he is. They care about the bottom line. So in the midst of Donald Trump doing all of his draconian Muslim ban, everything else that he's doing, Wall Street is quite happy with this, because to save 20 points on your tax as a corporation is a give out. But that's just the first thing with corporations. He's actually looking to do another tax holiday for corporations. And so, allowing them the opportunity to bring their overseas revenues back to the United States on a tax holiday. So now not only are they not going to pay a regular tax rate going forward, they now get to have a tax holiday on money that they've never paid taxes on so far. All right, so that's the first thing. The plan would also reduce the top rate on individual tax income now to 39.6% to 35%. So anyone making over $470,000 a year, you would go down from 39.6% to 35%. It's also going to eliminate this is the one that jumps out the most to me. It's going to eliminate a 3.8% tax that is used to help fund Obamacare, and it applies to investment income over $250,000 for a couple. And so this is another way in for Donald Trump to attack Obamacare. He's going to undermine this tax, this 3.8% tax on the wealthy, on investment income. All right, so that's the first wave. So the 15% bonus business tax rate, according to the New York Times, could open a huge loophole for people to receive business income through a limited liability company and other pass-through entity instead of as wages. And I'm going to be honest with you, if Donald Trump does this, like, I don't know, I'm going to have to look into that, right? I'm going to have to look into that because it's completely obscene to me to consider that I, as a person who's collecting money on my wages, would be able to pay or would have to pay more than corporations who are making money off of capital. So that loophole, I mean, this is what they want. This is where we're going, right? So he's looking to double the standard deduction. There's a lot of things in here that are problematic for any entity, the government. Problematic because this is going to blow a hole inside of the deficit. This is going to blow a hole, and the way they're going to try to fill that hole is by gutting every single program they possibly can. If you look at the New York Times put out a list of people who would lose in this, and according to New York Times, the losers would include upper middle income people in blue states. And again, think about upper middle income. Upper middle income is not, you're not wealthy, but you're not in the working class. You're really at that threshold. And it's that spot that I talk about quite often. People who, quite frankly, like me, who make too much to get anything from the government. Anything, not even a good child deduction, deduction for children, because you make too much money, but you don't make enough money to actually get ahead. That's that upper middle income bracket. And those are the people who are going to get hurt the most in this. The New York Times outlined that the deficit hawks, I don't really care about the deficit hawks so much, but the Trump plan doesn't come with any estimates of impact to the federal budget. That's because it's going to blow a hole in the federal budget. Now, this is where I actually heard some consistency from Republicans to a certain extent. And this is what I mean by that. Mitch McConnell and other senators and congressmen stated that this is basically dead on arrival if it's going to blow the deficit out of the water, and that this is going to have to be deficit neutral. So deficit hawks are speaking out about this. The thing is that's not any type of signal that they're going to roll back the tax breaks. That's a signal that Donald Trump has to get busy looking for programs to cut to subsidize this. So to be clear, this is no virtue signaling. It might be virtue signaling, but this is not a signal of virtue on behalf of the Republican Congress. But this is indicative of the reality that they want these tax breaks, but they're willing to gut every single program possible to make it deficit neutral. And then the other losers, according to the New York Times, are people who want Congress to pass something. Because it's very possible that in many ways this is going to undermine their ability not only to pass this piece of legislation, but if it's passed, it would have detrimental effects on programs going forward and the ability to get anything done. So there's a lot going on with this tax plan. It's not tax reform. He is breaking down the tax brackets from 7 brackets down to 3, but that's not really tax reform. That's like flattening the tax code, essentially. Right? right? That means that there are going to be some people who are paying the same amount as billionaires that weren't paying the same amount as billionaires before, right? So flattening out the tax code doesn't really simplify, and it's not really tax reform. This is just a tax break. This is a give out. This is a gimme to the wealthiest in society. It may, there are going to be some people who benefit from having the double standard deduction. That's actually going to benefit some people who really depend on that. But overall, this is predominantly going to benefit corporations and the wealthiest tremendously so. I mean, just think about your response. I mean, right now, I think I'm in like the 35. I don't even remember. I just filed last week. But I'm in that bracket where about 35% of my income goes to the government. And now, if this passes, corporations are going to be paying 20% less for their revenues as I pay for my labor. And this is what they put the value on, right? This is the whole thing. They place value on capital. They don't place value on labor, on wages. And that's the way it has always been. And this is reflective in Donald Trump's tax cuts. So we'll see. It's technically dead on arrival anyway, because it's going to be rewritten by the Senate and the Congress, the House of Representatives. But we'll see what portions of that are actually sustained and carried through. I want to get your input on that. What do you think about these tax breaks, right? Because there are some things in there that are going to be good for some people. If you depend on the standard deduction, he's doubling that. So that's actually going to be a good thing for the average person that depends on the standard deduction. The reality of it is, though, that a lot of people really don't even make enough money to even be able to pay income taxes. And so this is really a conversation that Donald Trump is trying to have with those of us who are just making enough money to pay taxes. It's really going to hurt us versus the people who are making all of the money. They're able to, it's particularly corporations, they're going to be able to save tremendously. 20 points, 20% less. That's a good deal. I think I'm going to open up a corporation and live my life directly through an LLC. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation, if you want to weigh in on the discussion, and let me know what you think about that. Let's talk about these monuments. That's another thing that Donald Trump is doing. So Donald Trump today signed an executive order to review the, quote, potentially change previous national monument designations. It's interesting that as he did this, he framed it as delivering power back to the states. This is always what they use to justify any action, is that they want to give the power back to the states. And this is what Donald Trump said. He said, quote, today, I'm signing an executive order to end another egregious abuse of federal power and to give that power back to the states and to the people where it belongs. Today, we're putting the states back in charge. It's a big thing. In reality, he's putting oil companies back in charge and giving them access to lands that President Obama and previous presidents had designated as national monuments. And if they're national monuments, that means that they must be preserved. And so Donald Trump, the only thing that he's getting done in his first 100 days is to expose these millions of acres of land. Particularly, let's take a look at Bears Ears National Monument. It's 1.3 million acres, a 1.3 million acre site in Utah that President Obama just designated in December. And now this land is going to be able to be drilled on, to have exploration on, to really undermine the preservation. Not just undermine the preservation, but there is no longer any preservation of this land. And he's caping this. Donald Trump is wrapping this in the language of, I'm giving this back to the state. No, what you're really doing is just providing an opportunity for oil companies and energy companies to exploit this land for their profit. And so that's just one of the monuments, but there are over, there's another one. The review covers all monuments designated that have over 100,000 acres going all the way back to 1996. So this is something that Republicans have been eyeing for a long time. And in actuality, this is really directly in the purview of the president. There's not much Congress could do. If they wanted to do, they wouldn't in this case, because there's a Republican House, Republican Senate, obviously. But underneath the Antiquities Act, presidents have nearly unlimited power to designate national monuments. And so one president has the ability to designate it. The following president has the ability to remove that designation and to turn land that was previously preserved by a former president over to corporations and companies who want to explore for energy, oil, and resources. All right, so this was some interesting and disturbing news dealing with North Korea. There was a meeting today that was held with President Trump and all 100 senators, and the issue was in regard to North Korea. The Trump administration announced a quote-unquote new strategy with regard to the DPRK. The interesting result of this meeting is that some senators said that it was basically a waste of their time. They didn't learn anything new in this meeting. Other senators said that they learned a handful of things. According to the BBC World News, a top U.S. commander in the Pacific deployed an advanced missiles defense system in South Korea. And it was a joint statement issued by Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, and Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates. And this is what they said. They said, quote, "The United States seeks stability and peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We remain open to negotiations toward that deal. However, we remain prepared to defend ourselves and our allies. The president's approach aims to pressure North Korea into dismantling its nuclear, ballistic missile, and proliferation programs by tightening economic sanctions and pursuing diplomatic measures with our allies in the region and regional partners." Okay, this is the United States language with regard to deploying the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea. However, this as confident as this language sounds from the American perspective, it's not so confident even from the South Korean perspective, because internally, the internal domestic politics of South Korea, some South Koreans view this as a provocative move that could in and of itself destabilize an already volatile situation. And so, you know, this sounds like a bold move to bolster the position of South Korea, but there's some South Koreans that look at this as a move that actually undermines their security. And so it's interesting in this dynamic that we often talk about, is that sometimes we believe that these bold, brash moves are moves that help, but in actuality, they undermine your security, right? We think of making a strike as something that could strengthen our security, but in actuality, the ramifications and the blowback from that action actually undermine our security in the long run. And this is what's coming from some voices in South Korea. So, you know, the United States is here saying, no, we're here to defend you. But in a lot of ways, the United States is undermining completely the security of South Korea, at least according to some South Koreans. Now, this is a standard move by the United States, right? This is what we do. This is how we react to these types of situations. And so it's almost an anathema to the military-industrial complex to look at this situation and say that the best move would be a non-provocative move. It's an anathema to them, because they see a puzzle and they bring a hacksaw. I don't know the right. They see a problem and they bring a hammer to every single problem. This is what they do. And in this case, it's quite possible that this move that they feel is bolstering the security of South Korea could be one that undermines the security of South Korea. A part of their plan, in addition to deploying the missile defense system, is to pressure China to lean more heavily on North Korea to freeze their nuclear weapons program. And this goes back to the conversation that we had last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, when President Xi was at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump. And President Xi actually had to explain to Donald Trump that despite contrary to popular belief, China does not really have the ability to demand that North Korea do anything, right? They can apply economic pressure if they find ways of doing that. They could try to apply diplomatic pressure if they find ways to do that. But it's not just an on-off switch. You can't just say North Korea is completely beholden to what China wants. No, North Korea has demonstrated in the past that they're willing to buck China in many regards. In fact, the Kim Jong-un's half-brother that was killed was actually the preferred son of China. And so in many ways, depending on what narrative of that assassination that you take, that in itself could have been a shirking or a rejection of Chinese influence in North Korea. So while we're looking at at China to lean heavily, quote, according to this article, lean heavy on North Korea, the truth of the matter is China may not be able to lean any heavier on North Korea than they already are. All right. So China, in addition to South Koreans, China itself says that the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system will destabilize security. And there have been protests vocally from China, but there have actually been protests against this move by South Koreans. This is going to be interesting. Again, there's a question of what should be done and what can be done. What are our options? And the options that we're taking at this point seem to be a standard play from the military industrial complex, from our Defense Department, right? This is what our this is what our military does. The question is it the right move? And if this is not the right move, what is the right move to handle the situation, right? I don't want to just be a contrarian and say that what our military is doing is wrong and not explore what are our other options here, because we are faced with a dilemma in North Korea. We are faced with a dilemma of nuclear proliferation that definitely has the ability to destabilize the region even more than it is already destabilized, right? To make a volatile situation even more volatile. So what is the right move? If I knew that, I probably wouldn't be doing this show right now. I probably would be somewhere giving them advice on how to do it. So let's take this caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Minister Bryce. So, Trump's, look at Trump's tax planning. I was watching the Young Turks earlier. And it's just like, oh, it's horrible. It's going to just like hurt a lot of people. And you're doing that neutrality situation. And I mean, it's just a situation where obviously we have to fight back, but it's just this is what he said he was going to do, and this is what happened, is happening, what's going on. And then now you have the North Korea situation, which has just turned into a whole disaster. And so you look at the past couple of presidents, Obama, Clinton, and even Bush, when it came to North Korea, Bush was kind of talking tough, then he kind of pulled back, and all Iraq stuff happened. Clinton and Obama, Clinton was supposed to go in, but he pulled back. Obama didn't go in. Well, he just kind of just let them do their test and kind of just like, well, we're not going to, get too deep involved. We don't want to, cause a situation. So I guess the thing is, Trump is kind of like, oh, America, we got to show toughness. We're going to cause people to die because you don't know what you're doing. And Clinton, Obama kind of was like, Clinton was like, I thought about it. I'm not going to do it. Obama said, look, as long as they're not threatening us to do what they're going to do, even though I think he talked to China a couple times about it. And Bush kind of fell off the wagon because he decided to focus on Iraq, which is stupid. But the point is our past presidents kind of decided to take a different road, which people might not think was good, but I kind of think it was maybe smart. I think took the smart role of not feeding into it, or this happens every couple of years and it dies down. But now Trump is going to escalate to go overboard because, he's a moron. So I guess, can you kind of break that down through the years?
Yeah. Thanks for the call, Bryce. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. I think that's right. I think in a lot of ways, Donald Trump is trying to prove that he's stronger than Barack Obama because he campaigned on the weakness of Barack Obama. The reality of it is that Barack Obama was very, I don't know how much more militaristic you wanted President Obama to be. I mean, he droned the hell out of everybody. I mean, he did whatever he could in Syria and realized that he can't really do anything more without making the situation worse. I mean, you really have to take a pause and say, if you want more than what President Obama was doing, what the entire hell is wrong with you, right? Because there's so many ways that President Obama was entirely too hawkish on the international stage. There's too many missiles, too many bombs that he dropped. How can you drop more bombs than the thousands that we were dropping every single day? And so in this pursuit by Donald Trump to prove that he's stronger than Barack Obama, Of course, even if he didn't sign off on the mother of all bombs, this is exactly in the culture that Donald Trump wants to foster, because he has to stand out above and beyond, right? And that in itself is going to undermine our stability. It has the potential of undermining global stability. It has the potential of creating blowback in so many cases. And as hawkish as Barack Obama was, you know, he still operated with a rational, realist paradigm on the international stage. And what I mean by that was he was blowing the hell out of people, blowing people the hell up. But at the same time, he realized he can't fix Syria by putting boots on the ground. He couldn't fix Syria by trying to institute regime change. And so now we're dealing with a president, and the only way that he could distinguish himself, here's another example. The only way he can distinguish himself from President Obama on illegal immigration and deportations. I mean, Barack Obama in the immigrant community is known as the deporter in chief. You know, Barack Obama was deporting people. I mean, just and he did, to be fair to him, they did put a laser-like focus on illegal immigrants who were committing crime and people who were convicted. You know, that's where he put his laser-like focus. But he still was deporting a lot of people. And because this is what Donald Trump ran on, he's got to one-up everything that Barack Obama did. You have to ask yourself, though, the question: if Barack Obama was the deporter in chief, what the hell is Donald Trump going to do to distinguish himself? Some of it may end up being pomp and circumstance. Some of it may end up being just show and language, right? Because that goes a long way, right? He could just say he's doing more and not actually do more. But in some regards, he wants to do more. He's deporting dreamers. You know, this, I believe, was it last week he deported the first dreamer, and this is very problematic, particularly not just on domestic issues. And I don't want to belittle or minimize the importance of the domestic issues, particularly immigration. But when you consider a nuclear proliferation that's occurring in North Korea, and you have a man like Donald Trump, whose number one goal so far, unless someone has gotten to him and talked some sense into him, his number one goal is to show that he's stronger than Barack Obama. Well, these are situations, particularly Syria and North Korea, that if you want to show and prove that you're stronger than Barack Obama, then your vision of strength, your idea of strength is how many bombs you can drop or how bold and brash you can be. Then your very next step could be that step that undermines the already volatile situation that existed prior to your administration. Excellent question, caller, 857-600, Bryce. I'm saying caller like I don't know you. Bryce, my dude, 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. I want to shift gears a little bit to something that made me pick up the paper and buy it today. Yes, I have an actual paper here for people listening to this on the podcast. I picked up this paper because of the headline: Marine Le Pen gets lift from unlikely source, the far left. And it's an article in the New York Times by Adam Nossiter. And he's my first question was like, well, what the hell are we talking about here? But as I begin to read the article, it begins to talk about Mélenchon, who has refused to endorse Macron at this point. And the reason is because he wants to do it in a small d democratic sense. He wants to give his voters and his supporters an opportunity to tell him who he should endorse. Now, we talked about this a little bit the other day. I personally think that is highly irresponsible considering your choice. But just a little bit from this article, to let somebody else make the case. And I don't know Adam Nossiter by name, so maybe you know him by name, and maybe he's written some horrible stuff. I don't know. But this was actually, the first paragraphs here were actually decent. He said, alone among all France's major political personalities, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the leader of its own France Unsubjugated movement, who finished a strong fourth on Sunday, et cetera, has refused to endorse Ms. Le Pen's opponent, the former economy minister, Emmanuel Macron. Mr. Mélenchon's critics say his obstinacy is petulant, wounded pride that can only help Ms. Le Pen's national front. I get trying to endorse the small d democracy in your supporters. And to a certain extent, I respect that. But then there's also a theory in, you know me, I take everything back to some arcane theory I learned in my master's program or my PhD program. But there's an argument, not so much a theory, but there's a prevailing argument in terms of leadership. What is leadership, especially representative leadership, what is it supposed to do? Is it supposed to always do exactly what the people want? Or should it do what it believes is the right thing to do? A lot of times, in the ideal situation, a leader's desires and what they feel is best would line up with what his constituents want. And this is kind of what's happening here with Melancon. He's not leading in the sense of, this is what I believe is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it. He's leading in the second sense of that term, where he's saying, well, I'm going to listen to my followers and see what they say and see what they want to do. Well, here's the question. If Mélenchon, I don't know, whatever, you get it. If his supporters say that he should support Marine Le Pen, I mean, let's skip the formalities, right? And the pretense. You know, if he's looking for permission to support a centrist neoliberal so that he can cover his back, cover his tail, what happens if his supporters say, no, you need to support Marine Le Pen, a person who should be an anathema to everyone in the conversation? So in this case, is he going to support someone who not only flirts with neo-Nazism on the global scale, but also is flirts with Holocaust denialism? I make it up if it's not. Is he going to, if his supporters say do that, is that what he's going to do? Because he's committing to do whatever his followers say. And clearly supporting Marine Le Pen is not the right thing to do as a leader of any organization. So the argument goes back. What do you think? Right? Let me listen to my followers, right? To cover my tail. Do you think that that in this case Jean-Luc Mélenchon should listen to his followers even if they say support Marine Le Pen? Or should he do what he believes is right, if he even believes that it's right, and turn around and say, actually, no, I'm going to support Macron because everything that I dislike about Macron is present in Marine Le Pen, plus all of these other things that are non-starter, that are not representative of the ideologies and the belief system that I have? That's the question. And because I want to demonstrate leadership, I think that he should skip that. I think that he should do the right thing and support the candidate who, whether you like this terminology or not, it is true. Marine Le Pen is the greater evil in this situation, and supporting Macron would be the lesser of two evils. And sometimes you have to take it on the chin and have some of your supporters upset with you. You have to have people who are going to unfollow you, people who are going to turn their backs on you. But in reality, when you're looking at a choice between someone who flirts with Nazism, someone who is a tacit Holocaust denier, someone who is an ethno-nationalist, is xenophobic, is against religious pluralism. There's so many things that she stands for that anyone in their right mind should be able to clearly say without any equivocation, I do not support her, and I will support her opponent. Anyway, I will not bring that back to the 2016 election because I am not relitigating that. You could have that conversation, 857-600-0518, if you want to weigh in on the discussion. All right, I'm sure there's some other stories in here. We'll argue about that in about 5 minutes. I think we have enough time. I might bring you on to argue about that. Alexander the Man is here today, and he's looking at me like he's chomping at the bit to discuss that. So if we get a chance to say, maybe we'll argue about it. But let me cover this other story about Ann Coulter. Something else that we probably all can argue about really, really good in this case. So Ann Coulter says that she's going to pull out of her speech at Berkeley. This is an ongoing conversation. Started, there was a lawsuit that was involved, and the judge said that she had to be able, the university had to allow her to speak. But Ann Coulter said herself that she is canceling her planned speech at the University of California, Berkeley, because, quote, she had lost the backing of conservative groups that had initially sponsored her appearance. According to Ann Coulter, she said that it's a sad day for free speech. Okay, I can't do this story like she's a real person. I didn't know gremlins could experience grief and sadness. I did not realize that. Ann Coulter is the quintessential troll. She is a person who travels around the country to say inflammatory things for the sole purposes of making money. And so for her to say that it's a sad day for anything, you have to have a soul to actually be sad. You have to have some humanity to experience grief. I don't believe that Ann Coulter can actually experience grief, because even if she ever had a soul, she's clearly dead on the inside. So I'm really just kind of laughing on the inside in this idea that she's sad about something. And then this idea that it's a sad day for free speech. Let me throw another group in here, a group that I donate to, the ACLU. They tweeted this out earlier today, saying that basically the same thing, co-signing with Hillary Clinton. What Ann Coulter said, that this was a sad day for freedom of speech. Here's the problem. There has always been a competition for speech. Free speech does not mean that you have the right to say what you want to say unchallenged. And what's happening in the Berkeley situation is that people are challenging her speech with their own freedom of speech. And I can't for the life of me understand why the ACLU cannot embrace that concept. You know, I get this idea. This is a very liberal idea. It is a liberal thought that everyone should be able to say whatever they want to say, no matter how hateful it is. Nobody is stopping you from saying what you want to say. Likewise, you cannot stop me from challenging what you want to say and saying something back and saying it to the top of my lungs. And so if you want to yell hate speech, I can out yell you with whatever speech that I want to yell, because I want to challenge your speech. That's what happens in the public square. There is a competition in the public square for ideas and for speech. And the First Amendment does not protect your right to say what you want to say unchallenged. And I'm not quite sure why all of the great thinkers and great attorneys at the ACLU can't get this very simple concept. Yes, Ann Coulter has the right to speak anywhere she's paid and hired to come speak her evilness. But you know what? Protesters have the right to shout at the top of their lungs against. And think about how ridiculous it was last week when Donald Trump's lawyers, attorneys, actually put out a memo saying that Donald Trump's First Amendment was being violated because of protesters. How completely obscene and absurd was that notion? So much so that I can't believe an attorney actually stood in front of a judge and made that argument. I don't know that there's enough money in the world that Donald Trump could pay me to stand before a judge knowing full and damn well that I'm getting ready to be embarrassed because of this fatuous argument, and then still get up there and do it. I don't know that I can do it, but clearly he found some attorneys who were willing to go in front of a judge and say that his First Amendment freedom of speech was violated because of protesters. That's not how it works. And this is the same thing conceptually. This is the same exact thing. Protesters shouted and resisted and did everything they could to let it be known that they disagree, even if it's a preemptive disagreement with this soulless person known as Ann Coulter, who is not capable of experiencing grief and sadness, which I find is completely hilarious that she says that this is a sad day. So anyway, this has divided a lot of people on the left. I'm surprised. You have the left is not a monolith. Just no ideology is. No side of the spectrum is a monolith, and in that regard, it's clear that people have differences of opinions on this, and I can understand. I can understand the basis of both sides of the argument, right? So if I were to be try to do it fairly and argue the other side of the argument, which I don't really genuinely believe, let's see how good I can do it. The other side of the argument is that I can't do it. I can't. I'm trying because I don't believe it. It's like I get that I want a Klansman to be able to go into the public and to march and to shout at the top of their lungs that white lives are the only lives that matter. I get that. I don't want anyone to stop the Klan from saying whatever they want to say. Because if they stop the Klan from saying what I institutionally stop the Klan from saying what they want to say, then they can stop me from saying what I want to say. But you know what you cannot prevent? You cannot prevent counter protests. You cannot prevent anti-racists from Antifa. You can't prevent them from showing up and saying face to face, in their face, you shout all lives matter, you shout white lives matter, and then somebody shouts back black lives matter. You cannot prevent that, because trying to stop that for the sake of making sure that these racists and these other people, let's forget the fact that they're racist, that these other people are you're trying to secure a platform for these other people. If the only way you can secure that platform is by denying someone else their right to protest, then you are yourself violating the First Amendment. How does the ACLU not get this? I get how Coulter and other people like that will use this to draw sympathy and try to forward their political agenda. I get how they would do it, disingenuously so. But the ACLU, of all people, I need to find a way to get my refund. Not really. I'm gonna leave you alone. You could keep the little. I didn't send you much anyway. But the point is this. It's very simple. The best way I guess another example is Philadelphia. When we went to the DNC, there was an abortion, there was a pro-life movement, and it wasn't even pro-life. It was basically anti-everything that's progressive movement that was sitting in the middle of it was actually not even a Bernie Sanders rally so much as it was like Bernie Sanders rally / socialist rally. There was a lot of different groups who had gathered, and dead smack in the middle were a bunch of people with signs that saying God hates F's. God hates you. If you ever had sex out of marriage, all this religious jargon, and they were protected by the police. No problem. I get it. They need to hide behind the police. That did not stop me or anyone else from going face to face with them and challenging them. I have the video too. I never share that video, but going face to face with them and challenging them on every single thing that they have to say, to the point where they got frustrated and left. It's not my fault that they left. It's not my fault that they continuously were challenged, because I have the right to be out there, just like every counter protester had a right to be out there. And yes, they had a right to be out there as well. But we cannot start creating and securing. Pause. Rewind the tape. These are the same people who complain about safe spaces. This is essentially trying to create a safe space for hate speech. I don't really care what type of speech it is. You're trying to create a safe space. I'm opposed to safe spaces for liberals, for progressives. My position is that you do not have the right to go into the public square and be unchallenged. That's the purpose of the public square. If you want to go to your private meeting, fine. You want to go to your lodge, fine. You want to go to your club, fine. But when you are in the public, you do not have the constitutional right to be unchallenged. Because if we're going to create a safe space, the only way we're going to create a safe space for you is by violating the rights of someone else, the First Amendment rights of someone else. I know someone at the ACLU has to understand that. I know Ann Coulter is smart enough to understand that, but she knows how to use this for her political advantage. And so she says, from the depth of her soulless heart, that this is a sad day for free speech. No, this is actually a sad day for people who cannot handle some basic cognitive dissonance and some basic tension in competing rights. Because once rights compete, you have to step back. The government has to step back and allow those rights to compete, particularly the First Amendment right to say something. You have to take a step back and let the people with hate speech shout as loud as they want, and allow the counter protesters to shout as loud as they want as well. That's all I have to say. You could join the discussion, weigh in on the conversation, 857-600-0518. We have a voicemail. Let's take a listen to see what this voicemail is all about.
Hello, Ben. This is Victor from Florida. My question has to do with, I know we saw evidence of what Syria done to its people, and that was videotaped and shared clearly. Mm-hmm. However, I haven't seen any evidence of the impact from the response bombing that the U.S. did to Syria. I would expect to see broken jets and broken airfields and broken buildings, and nothing has been shown to say this is what happens in response to what you guys did. So I don't understand that.
That's a good
Also,
question. So
I am not sure why Korea and Syria has just gotten so much play to the forefront when we have local issues, local government issues that have not been addressed. Is this all just a distraction process where, wag the dog syndrome, where, create a war so that money can be spent in that process, but still reject or neglect our home issues? Hopefully you can have a comment on that. Thank you.
yeah. All right. Thanks for the call, Victor from Florida. So to answer your first question, in terms of where's the evidence of everything that was destroyed, hard to say because planes were taking off from the Syrian airport that same day. So I'm not quite sure. I know they said they destroyed 20% of the planes and probably their capacity there, but people were flying off right away. But to your bigger point, not people, but the Air Force, Syrian Air Force was flying out of that airport that same day. To your other question is, why are these issues in the forefront so much? You mentioned North Korea. I think North Korea is a legitimate issue to have on the front page. All right, what's happening with North Korea is really going to be the first test for Donald Trump, if you want to even use that type of language with regard to Donald Trump. This is his first major test because, North Korea is trying to get a nuclear weapon. I'm sorry, they have a nuclear weapon. They're trying to get an ICBM to deliver that package. They're trying to assert themselves and become a nuclear power for whatever reason, and we can debate about the reasons. Donald Trump has to answer that question. And so, not just Donald Trump, but the international community. And quite frankly, let me correct myself. This is not a question for Donald Trump to answer. This is not a question for the United States to answer in isolation. This is a question for the international community to answer together because it is a threat. It is a highly destabilizing possibility that the international community has to grapple with. So I agree that North Korea should definitely be in the news as much as it is. I don't think I agree, and pause, let me say this correctly. I agree with you on Russia. I'm not sure that Russia, in a lot of ways, I'm really tired of seeing it in the news, not because I don't believe it, but even if it happen, the hack happened, or Russia was, whatever, it's not what's happening in North Korea. Right? It's not what Democrats are trying to use it for. It's not a means of explaining away why Hillary Clinton lost. It should not be used as that. It's most certainly not a reason for us to go to war. It's certainly not a reason for any responsible adult to suggest that this is a reason to go to war or that this is a call to war. And we've heard this type of language. So with regard to Russia, Russia is, in many ways, in a weird way, it is a wag the dog scenario for the Democrats, particularly to kind of wash away any responsibility for the loss in the election. Now, this is not, again, I want to make it clear, I have no reason whatsoever to believe that Russia did not do this, did not get involved. I have no reason to believe that because this is what states do. This is what nations do. The United States does it. And the United States does it very well. We do it on a regular basis. Russia does it. China does it. This is what we do. So I have absolutely no reason to believe that Russia did not get involved. However, it's still, to me, not news enough to be talking about, definitely 100% not reason to be talking about a war or conflict of any magnitude. You want to talk about a counter hack? Fine. You want to talk about counter influence? Fine. Do that because we're doing it right now. But any type of conflict and wagging the dog syndrome, absolutely not. All right, 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. We have a few more minutes here, and I want to double back. I don't have the set up, but what the hell ever. We only have 10 more minutes. Come on, John. I think, John, you vehemently disagree with me on Macron and the Jean-Luc Mélenchon not endorsing Macron. Right. Yeah, come on up. Come on up. We're live, but this is family. This is all, this should be, I know we didn't set up for it. We didn't even.
You got me here?
Yeah, I think the mic should be on, yeah.
All right.
And then we'll just put that one out of the shot and grab your chair. Have a seat, man. Relax. We're gonna get you in camera, probably camera 3. Yeah, come on in and jump in camera 3.
I'll just get,
Yeah, get a little close. It's cool. You know, it's cool. All right,
So
let's have an argument. Go.
It's not that one. First off, pretty much
You're
the
not.
the comments that we're
Yeah,
going.
you're not standing up. Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
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 The comments that were coming in on YouTube pretty much were all the same thing. We had actually a very interesting comment that was coming in from someone.
Can you hear him? Okay. No.
No.
Yeah.
You haven't got me at all.
I hear him. Yeah, pull it a little closer. Can you guys, wait, let's pause a second. I want to make sure that YouTube, holler back, Facebook, Twitter, can you hear John? Talk, John.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, I think I hear you. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Anyway, so actually it was Chalupa right there that was saying it earlier. He was saying that that is actually a tradition in French politics, and on top of that, it's different because of the norms of politics over in that country. So that's one reason why I disagree. The other reason I disagree is just because of actually U.S. history, and that gets back to the shift that we've seen of lesser evilism. When you actually are given the lesser evilism choice, what ends up happening is almost like Zeno's paradox. You keep moving towards a position.
Not by default and not necessarily, but I could see the possibility of that.
But we're
happening.
talking about what happens in reality. You're talking about it like you have to be rational.
Come in a little closer.
You have to be rational, and you have to say, I have to make a rational decision to not embrace fascism, to take the lesser evil, and to not have something horrible happen.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, you also have to look at it in terms of rational when you look at a historical context, like what has happened to politics in the United States.
Yep. Keep going.
All right. So when you continually make the lesser evil politics and you continually have triangulation of policy positions for one party, which is what happened over in France. I mean, the Socialist Party was saying that we were going to be against austerity, and then they flip-flopped, which is why the socialist candidate fared so poorly in that election.
Okay.
Now he's backing Macron rather than backing, obviously,
Marine Le Pen.
And so I can understand the mindset of not wanting to back the guy who's going to push for more austerity, more right-wing policy positions.
But Marine Le Pen is going to do the same.
She is. She is actually. She is.
And with the added bonus,
here's
with
the
the
problem.
added bonus of ethno-nationalism and
I agree.
racism and xenophobia.
Now, there are some that are making the same claims about Marie Le Pen, and I'm not as familiar with her economic policy. I will say that I think Marie Le Pen is probably a better politician and more knowledgeable than Donald Trump, but I think that she's probably making the same. I think she's probably making the same claims about getting away from austerity, getting away from IMF, letting the EU, maybe even talking about a Frexit. I think she's making the same claims that, like Donald Trump did before the election, where it's going to go back to basically neoliberalism with ethno-nationalism, as you said. However, you have leverage now. Without using that leverage, you're never going to get anything. And so I fully am backing at least let me talk to my supporters before I back. Or
so if his supporters,
Bernie's position was vote your conscience, when he was talking about that before.
Before he actually endorsed her. Yeah. In a very full-throated fashion, he endorsed her, he endorsed her in a manner that I really was surprised. I'm like, he went, instead of just getting, if it was me, because I'm petty as hell, I would have gotten up there and say, I endorse Hillary Clinton. Have a good day. Right. Bernie Sanders went all out. Yeah. But back to the race in France.
He went around and he campaigned for her.
Yeah, I mean, he went all in. But in this case, if his supporters say, I want you to vote for, support Marine Le Pen, what should he do?
Well, one, I don't think that will be what the actual outcome is. I think that a lot of the guys and a lot of the people who have been backing him, a lot of his supporters, probably have the same opinion about ethno-nationalism that you do. They're the leftists of the leftists. Okay. They felt that the socialists were too center. So I don't think that will be the outcome. However, if that does become the outcome, he's almost hamstrung himself, because if he
he's got to do it.
Either I vote for Le Pen, well, that's going to kill whatever leverage he will have. Yeah. Or he says, I am not going to vote for Le Pen, and I'm just going to say abstain or say Macron. Macron.
Yeah,
keep saying Macron, which is
listen.
like
This is an American show about French. I'm from the South, and he's from Rhode Island. So we're not going to do these accents right. But okay, so here's the dilemma. We have less than 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a lot of time to play around with this, to wait and try to cover your tail. In a way, I get maybe this is part of their culture, fine. But there's an urgency to this because. Would you agree Marine Le Pen does not need to be the president of France?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
100%.
so with that being said, then Jean-Luc Mélenchon needs to go ahead and be a leader and take it on the chin. He's going to lose people. He's going to have people who don't like him. He's going to get talked about, just like Bernie Sanders. He's probably going to get dragged. But if you agree that Marine Le Pen does not need to be the president, then why wouldn't you agree that he needs to go ahead and Jean-Luc Mélenchon needs to go ahead and endorse Macron?
Because I don't think that it is his responsibility to his section of the politic in
Lean in a
France.
little more. Mhm.
I don't think it's his responsibility to actually endorse that candidate. And I understand the worst case scenarios, but I also understand what the reality, when you talk about we have to make a rational decision, you can look at the history of the United States since the Clintons came to power to see that reality play out in real time. I mean, look at Jesse Jackson. Look at Kucinich, not Kucinich. Kasich. No.
No, are you going in
Kucinich,
years?
Yeah. It was.
You're right. It was
Kucinich.
Kucinich. He did run. You're right.
And then Dean. And then, I mean, every single time that we've had, now Bernie, every single time that we've had this where the left gets a little bit less power, and then the party turns around and does exactly what it wants with neoliberalism and with, really no change.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that rationale, and you see, like, I don't want to say game theory, but like when you
No, please don't say that, please.
Right, when you start thinking about it though, as a rational human being, okay, my choice is to go for Macron, who's going and I'm going to take my supporters and embrace his positions, thereby solidifying his base and giving him even more power. I think his best option is personally just to abstain, to say
But even an abstention would be would undermine, would embolden Marine Le Pen.
Absolutely. But the problem is that when you're talking about the percentages that you have over there, and you have probably a higher percentage turning out for the polls, but a lower percentage of party grabs. I mean, we were talking about she got 23%. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about a more diverse and less centralized government. And I mean, Mélenchon is running to completely decentralize the government. Wants to do away, I think, with the presidency altogether. So when you're talking about that, it's different than looking at it through the lens of American politics, where you have the duopoly and duopoly only. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's a gamble, but it's less of a gamble than saying, hey, I'm going to go this. I'm going to basically delegitimize myself and my movement by embracing neoliberalism and austerity, which is coming, which everyone hates, and we know that is the bane of the French. And thereby, when in 2022, no matter who wins, even if Macron wins, you're now going to see Le Pen have a surge, and there's going to be no rationale that will fight her message. Right now, Mélenchon is the rationale that is fighting her message. We have these things without ethnic.
Well, actually, let me jump in there because we only have like 2 minutes left. Okay. Let me jump in there with that logical explanation that your logic there, because it suggests that if you came in with Jean-Luc Mélenchon and with his socialist program, that it's actually going to be enough to change the material conditions of the people who are voting for Marine Le Pen for the purposes of fighting back against the economic effects of neoliberalism. Mm-hmm. That's a lot to overcome in 4 years. There's a good possibility that nobody, not even Jean-Luc Mélenchon and his program, could do enough to actually stave off a resurgence of Marine Le Pen in 4 years to come. So the question is if that's your rationale, then there's still a possibility that nobody's going to be able to fix the effects, the economic effects that the working class, let's say, of France is going to support Marine Le Pen for.
Right, but at the same time you have. Let's say you're talking about Marine Le Pen coming in and you're saying she can make some changes. Her changes are all going to be fought from the IMF. They're all going to be fought from, the EU, and she's going to be battling. But the problem is they're going to see that battle. Okay. They're going to see her trying to make changes. Now, again, I'm not necessarily sure she will be doing those on the economic front. Okay. I think that she's used the same.
I think she will. Okay. I think she's as much of a neoliberal as Macron.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think she's going to fight the EU.
Okay, I heard you wrong.
I think she's going to take the IMF. Yeah. Now, but at the same time, she has the argument of making for the fight, whereas Macron is not. There's going to be no fight. It's going
No,
to be
because it's the
continuing
system
the
that he
deal,
believes in.
and we're going to be embracing austerity,
Yeah.
which we all know is an absolute bullshit idea.
Okay, sounds good. That's the last word. We're out of time. Go over to Anoa Chonga's channel and check out her show that starts at 9 o'clock, and then be back to join us on Friday morning, Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time with Intercept Live. We'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
It's Ben Dixon!
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.